Here age relives fond memories of the past, and here youth may savor the challenge and promise of the future. These words were said July 17th, 1955, in front of hundreds and then broadcast to thousands by Walter Elias Disney, or Walt Disney as we now know him. Walt Disney was born December 15th, 1901 in Chicago, but spent most of his childhood in Marshland, Missouri and Kansas City. It was in Marshland, Missouri where he learned to draw, working for one of his neighbors, the old retired doctor, drawing horses and getting paid for each picture. In Kansas City, he developed his love for theater from one of his friends, and then in his early teenage years tried to join with the Army during World War I, but was rejected due to his age. Walt wouldn't let that stop him and decided to volunteer with the Red Cross and drove an ambulance, helping out the soldiers whenever he could. It was actually, you could identify his ambulance quite easily as it was the only one that was covered in cartoon characters. Coming back from the war, Walt found himself unemployed like many veterans, and due to his brother Roy, who was working in Kansas City with a bank, managed to get a job at Pesman Rubin Art Studio making TV advertisements. It was actually there that he met one of his best friends for the rest of his life, Ubi Iwerks. And Ubi, like him, was an artist and stayed with Disney for most of his life. After Pesman and Rubin Art Studios went down, Ubi and Disney started opening up their own art studios, time after time, failure after failure, until they opened one called Newman Laugh-O-Grams. Newman Laugh-O-Grams would make small, funny sketches, and eventually did fail, but it was due to this failure, this successful failure, that Disney decided to move to Hollywood to open up his own studio. It was actually due to his brother and him pulled together their money and managed to open a small studio, and just as it seemed like that studio would fail, they got their first break when a producer from New York fell in love with Disney's Alice Comedies, a live-action show, and decided to start producing it and airing it. In 1927, the Disney studio started working for Universal, and Ubi actually made a very successful cartoon character called Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Oswald the Lucky Rabbit became an instant success, and Disney went to the producer, a man named Mintz, to try to get a bit more money for the staff. Mintz instead had a better idea, or what seemed like a better idea to him, that he would lower Disney's funding, and if Disney didn't like it, he would be unemployed, and most of his animation staff would work for him. Disney rejected the idea, and as a result, became unemployed. And in fact, the battle for Oswald the Lucky Rabbit continued until 2006, 76 years after its creation. It was actually due to this setback that Disney was able to create none other than the most iconic figure in all of cartoon history, Mickey Mouse. The first sketch ever featuring Mickey Mouse was not, as many suspect, to be Steamboat Willie, but was actually a separate one called Plane Crazy. Of course, Plane Crazy was not aired because he couldn't find anyone to air it. Steamboat Willie was the first one to be done in sound and was the first one to be aired. And then Walt Disney, because he loved the whole concept of sound in movies, went back and changed Plane Crazy so it included sound and then placed it out. It was because of the success of Mickey Mouse that he was able to start another little funding project called Silly Symphonies, which actually came up with one of the most iconic songs of that time period, and probably the anthem for the Great Depression, Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf. Of course, Disney was not satisfied. He decided to risk it all on one project, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, or named Disney's Folly.